creation is wounded, afflicted, abused, suffering oppression, that just as vulnerable people are oppressed by those who are powerful, those who are greedy or careless, so is the creation.
The water is contaminated, the air is contaminated, the land is contaminated, we're losing species.
When you kill a species, as the saying goes, extinction is forever.
It's a basic question of who we are, a basic question of personal and social integrity that's at stake here.
We can no longer pretend that we don't know we are destroying God's creation.
Global warming, toxics,
pesticides, herbicides,
Contamination of our water.
solid waste management,
People are forced off of land because of environmental damage.
and the question of justice.
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 Eco-justice.
it is scary when you think of the urgency.
Killing a species is what I call super killing, in the sense that there can be no more birth.
By delaying, things will only be worse.
Studying the globe as a living entity has been very moving for me, and I have a lot of confidence in myself as well as others that this task will be addressed and that there's much that can be done.
Eco-justice is a theological term in that it picks up the concern of the church and of God for justice in human society, but also the concern of God for God's own creation. And the eco in eco-justice, of course, means the ecological wholeness and social economic justice, insisting that you can't have one without the other. The biblical mandate for concern about eco-justice, it seems to me, is pervasive all through the biblical story. You may begin, if you like, with the first chapter of Genesis, which gives the first creation account, which comes to a climax with the judgment by God that everything is very good. God puts the human creature in the garden and instructs the man and woman to till and keep the garden. Tilling really exemplifies everything that we human beings do to meet our needs from nature, not only tilling the ground, but mining and manufacturing and exchanging and so on. And keeping means doing all of that with care. I think it's terribly important, however, to get beyond these creation accounts and to realize that the concern for the non-human creation really runs all through the scripture in one way or another. One key place is from the 146th Psalm, which begins with reference to the Lord God as the creator of heaven and earth and all that is in them, and the one who executes justice for the oppressed. So that creation and deliverance are two themes that are all mixed up together. And the Creator is the Redeemer, and the Redeemer is always the Creator. In the New Testament, Paul talks about the creation groaning. This is in Romans chapter 8, groaning in travail, and yet looking forward to sharing in what he says, what he calls the glorious liberty of the children of God. And this really is in the context of the kind of Old Testament assumption that nature and human beings are always so bound up together that the suffering of one affects the other. We find from Jesus himself a real love and appreciation of the natural world. Jesus talks about the lilies of the field, the birds of the air. Jesus tells a parable about the sheep that gets lost, and the shepherd that is so concerned about that one sheep that he goes out and searches until he can bring the sheep back.
There's a long history of concerns about environmental and justice issues in the church. More recently, there's a new wave of concern for these two kinds of issues related to each other, with the appearance of global warming and ozone depletion and several of the acid rain, several of these more prominent concerns we have today. the feeling was that there was a need for a new look at the whole questions of our relation to the environment and their relationship to justice issues. A task force was selected on the usual form, which is to put together people of expertise, people with theological and ethical kinds of expertise and factual expertise, and to develop a thoroughgoing study. There are 4 norms which guide this ethical policy. One is sustainability, which means the long-range capacity to sustain life on Earth. And our economic system has to keep within the norm of sustainability. There's also a norm of justice, which includes the sort of the sub-norms of sufficiency, that is, that we need to produce enough to feed people. Also under justice is the norm of participation, which includes the idea that people should have the right to have a say in how their future is determined. There's also the norm of solidarity, which has 3 kind of reference. One is solidarity with the other individuals in community, the necessity of a community as a base. The second is solidarity with people that are poor. And the third is solidarity with other groups who are working on eco-justice kinds of questions. In looking at the problems of the environment today, we didn't try to cover everything, but we worked on 5 areas. The first area is the question of agricultural sustainability, the movement from a heavy use of land to a more sustainable kind of agriculture. The second has to do with water quality. The loss of wetlands and the pollution of bays and streams are a significant problem in this country. The third area is that of wildlife and wildlands. Wildlife, of course, the issue of the extinction of certain species, and wildlands, the loss of wildlands in the United States. The next area is the question of toxics, and in fact, the larger question of solid waste disposal. Finally, there are certain global questions. We focused on ozone and atmospheric warming.
We were heavy chemical users. Our cattle had a lot of pink eye. Our calves were born and just expired soon after they were born, and we really didn't know why. My husband brought in some baby coyotes once from the field and had put them in a sack that he had some corn seed in, and this corn seed had been treated with a chemical to kill rootworms, and brought them in, and a couple of them to show the children, and they got out of the sack and died. And that was a very moving experience for us to see what chemical use really does, to wild creatures, let alone what it had been doing to my husband and all of us as we used it. So we investigated what is now called sustainable ag methods. We went that way, and it was like a new lease on our farming life. We enjoyed farming again. We felt good about it. We didn't feel like our health was threatened, nor did we take a loss in our net income due to lack of productivity. And so, I'm really sold that that's the way to go.
Water quality is an important issue for the Eco-Justice Task Force. It's an issue that the whole world is addressing right now as far as contamination.
We should be concerned because we depend so much on water, on the quality of water as well as the quantity of water. A lot of the cities in the United States depend on surface water for drinking. If we don't have good water quality, then we endanger the health of everyone. Groundwater is another important area which has been ignored. Many people depend on groundwater for the drinking water, and it's being contaminated.
It is our blood to the universe, to God's creation. And if we continue to contaminate the water, we are not going to be able to exist.
Animals and plants are good creations of God and have a kind of value and dignity in their own right. I think we see that taught not long after creation in the story of Noah and the ark, where when earth is under threat of decay because of human iniquity, God is nevertheless concerned for the creations and the other creatures. And the Noah story, in a certain sense, is the first endangered species project. The rest of the creation counts in the eyes of God, that it's not simply instrumental or resources for human use, but they have a kind of dignity or integrity of their own, and I think that Christians and other monotheists ought to recognize that in the kind of culture they build on a landscape such as our American landscape.
Waste management is such an enormous burden on society now. And yet it's so intricately related to each of us as individuals. The cup we use, the plastic we choose. All the studies that I'm aware of have shown in large proportion that rural, disadvantaged minority communities seem to be the site of preference for locating toxic dumps or hazardous waste dumps.
Internationally or globally, the forests are part of the big ecosystem that keeps our air circulating, keeps the oxygen circulating, carbon dioxide circulating in the system. But if we can't maintain a certain level of trees in vegetation to continue that circulation, then we're only going to make the global warming problems worse.
I worry a lot about global warming. Global warming in the next 100 years may change landscapes so much that much of the wilderness areas that we've set aside, the conservation areas, are radically transformed by the change of climate. That could be disastrous.
The biblical story is not a story that ended when the New Testament got written, but is still continuing, and the chief actor in the story is God, who is always both creator and redeemer. So that the creator who loves the creation, surely as redeemer in a situation unprecedented today of peril to the whole creation, surely this creator redeemer is at work in the crisis of our own time, calling faithful people to get involved with God precisely in keeping and healing God's creation.
The church has many concerns, and on the one hand, this may seem like just the addition of another kind of effort or another kind of concern to proliferate the mission of the church so it becomes so thin. On the other hand, this issue of environment and justice are centrally concerned with who the church is. How we relate to the creation, both human and non-human, is extremely important to the life of the church. So on the other hand, it's not just the addition of another kind of concern in the mission of the church, but the infusion of something which is central to the church's life. And unless we somehow bring these concerns into the life of the church, then it seems to me that we will not be answering the call or the invitation of God to be doing a new thing.
Eco-justice needs to be part of the mission of the local church. In every community today, there are issues of ecology and justice. And even the issues that on the face of it look like they are particularly environmental issues generally have human dimensions to them.
Get involved in local government. Get involved with state government. Know who your legislators are. Get the newspapers, get the magazines, question. Participate in public meetings. Go to these meetings and listen and learn. But more importantly, ask questions. And if your questions don't get answered, simply go back and do research, must research, and bring out the truth and follow through.
In the most basic, selfish way, you must be concerned. But taking it from a religious sense, you are compelled to keep God's creation for the future. You can do no less than that.